Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of True Crime with me, Haiti, on Haiti's Corner. Now, the case for today is the case of Piia Ristikankare. This case is from Finland, where I live and where I'm from, and the pictures of the person. This is a missing persons case unsolved from the 1980s, and the pictures of the victim can be seen on this side of the screen. So let's go on to the case and the video where I will have an expert interview um, later on in this video. So October 7th, 1988, another ordinary Friday evening in the home of the Ristikankare family. The weather is bleak, cold, and sizzling rain. Uh, it was already dark outside at this time of year, in October in Finland. The family consists of a single dad who's a bricklayer and his three children. 15-year-old daughter Piia, 14-year-old son Teijo, and 3-year-old son Kalle. The father, Heikki Ristikankare, had warmed up the sauna in the basement, and at the time of the beginning of the events, he was in the sauna in the basement with his what he calls father-in-law, but apparently it's his ex-father-in-law, the maternal grandfather of his children, and the children are upstairs watching TV. The two eldest children, Pia and Teo, had an argument over the TV remote control, like, well, many siblings of the same age, of the same age range, would have, especially in their teen years. Once Pia had had enough of the argument, she takes her small purse with about 20 Finnish marks, which is about €7, nowadays 7.6 US dollars in it, puts her shoes on, denim jacket on, and storms out the door. The clothes weren't fit for the cold, rainy October evening. After closing the door behind her, the mystery begins. Welcome to a new episode of True Crime on Hades Corner with me, Heidi. Today, the case is from Finland, from the country where I'm from, uh, and live in currently, and have lived for most of my life. Now, this case is a very uh, somewhat disturbing one, if you will, and this has aspects that a lot of the cases do not have, which is the involvement of a cult. Um, and I have interviewed an expert on this specific cult that is in question in this episode, and I will show you the interview with the expert in its entirety later on in this video. So let's go. This is the baffling case of Piia Ristikankare, a 15-year-old uh, girl who went missing and has never been seen or heard from again. On October 7th, 1988, another ordinary Friday evening in the home of the Ristikankare family. The weather was bleak, cold, and sizzling rain. It was already dark outside and cold. The family consists of a single dad, Heikki Ristikankare, who's a bricklayer by profession, and his three children. 15-year-old daughter Piia, who's the central figure in this case, 14-year-old son Teijo, and 3-year-old son Kalle. The father had warmed up the sauna in the basement. By the way, a lot of Finnish houses and even apartments have a sauna. Not all, but quite a few. While the dad was in the sauna with what he called his father-in-law, but it was in fact his ex-father-in-law, the maternal grandfather of his children. The children were upstairs watching TV. The two eldest children, uh, Pia and Teo, were having an argument over the TV remote control, which is quite normal, quite um, typical argument to have between teenage siblings of probably the same age, um, especially in their teen years. So once Pia had enough of this argument, she takes her small purse with approximately 20 Finnish marks on it, uh, and puts her shoes on and denim jacket and storms out the door. The clothes weren't fit for the cold, rainy October evening, and in for any weather in October in Finland. After closing the door behind her, the mystery begins. Piia Ristikankare is never seen or heard from again. Also goes the official story of the police. The town the Ristikankare family lived in is called Piia. It has since become a part of the city of Kaarina. At the time, there were about 5,000 or so people living there at the time of the events or the disappearance in the autumn of 1988. Back then, the main motorway from the capital Helsinki to Turku, one of Finland's biggest cities, went through Piikkiö, the small town they lived in. Uh, the night Pia disappeared, there there was disco evening at the youth culture house in the town center, and according to eyewitnesses, there were about 100 to 150 people in their mid to late teens from the next town over, Paimio, who had come to town for the disco. But even given these facts, there are no credible eyewitnesses who have come forward in the following now almost 36 years. So Pia had made arrangements with a friend of hers to go for a sleepover for that weekend to a friend's place in the next town over, Paimio. But there are no sources I could find that specified how much earlier Pia made these arrangements with this friend. Uh, for the weekend, she disappeared, but those plans had, however, been messed up by a job gig the father, a bricklayer, had received for that Saturday, which meant that Pia had to cancel her plans because she would have had to look after her 3-year-old little brother, Kalle. Personally, I do not understand why her older brother Deo, who was just year and a half um, younger than Pia, he was older. He was 14. Uh, then 14 couldn't wouldn't have been able to do that, but hasn't been important enough. This detail hasn't been important enough to be mentioned in sources, but it probably, I would venture to guess it has something to do with their religious views. You know, it's like the women's job to take care of the children, the house, and so forth. But regardless, apparently, sometime on Friday, I'm not the again the sources didn't specify when the father Heikki Ristikankare found out that he could take the small boy with him to the job. But I assume from what I read that he found out on Friday. But at that point, well, they didn't apparently communicate very well in this family because he didn't know Pia had already cancelled her plans previously to go to her friend's place for a sleepover that weekend. This is where weird things start to happen, and we'll like more weird things, like super weird things start to happen, and this and I'll touch on this in the interview with um, the cult expert. So the first weird thing is starts on the day of disappearance because uh, Thea, Thea was 15 and she had stormed out of the the family home, like very lightly clothed, with with probably nothing more than a small purse she had to wherever she went. But her father didn't bother calling that friend's place later on to check if his daughter arrived safely after Pia had taken off with very little belongings while he was in the sauna with Pia's grandfather, and he didn't miss his daughter or didn't worry after his daughter until Sunday when she didn't show up at the Kingdom Hall. This is the the um, the family where Jehovah's Witnesses, and Kingdom Hall is the Jehovah's Witnesses church. That's what they call it. And then only then did he call the friend's family. It's not entirely clear whether or not this family were Jehovah's Witnesses or not, but associating and being befriending worldly people is frowned upon by the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's because they consider themselves in the world but not of it. So, and only then he bothered to call the friend's family. Like, come on, seriously, they had phones. Clearly, the man had a phone because at least a landline at his disposal at home, presumably, because he was able to call them. So, like, seriously, they had phones back in '88, and when a teenage girl storms out into the cold, rainy October night, lightly clothed and hardly any money, it's reported that she had 20 Finnish marks and a bank card in her purse she took with her, nothing else. And 20 Finnish marks would be, as mentioned previously, it's about €7. We joined the euro in 2002. So it was about 20 Finnish marks back in '88 was about €7 or 7.62 US dollars at the time of recording. According to most reliable sources, Pia had 2,600 Finnish marks, or about 910 euros, saved up on her bank account, but her account has remained untouched since her disappearance. As mentioned previously, Pia's dad was a single dad. The parents of the Ristikankare family had divorced a couple 2 years earlier, 2 or so years earlier, and the reason for the parents, so that would have been in 85 or 86, um, and the reason for Pia's parents' divorce was her mother's alcoholism, and because she had abused the family bank accounts to get alcohol and possibly other substances for herself and her friends, her drinking buddies. And Pia took this really heavily and never wants to see her mother again, which she never did. And the mother died in, I think, 1990, or somewhere between 1990 and 1992. And I'll talk about um, their religion and its effects soon enough. Uh, so the Ristikankare family were Jehovah's Witnesses, and their lives revolved largely around that religion. Pia's mother had joined the Jehovah's Witnesses religion upon marrying Pia's dad sometime before or around uh, the time of Pia's birth, because premarital sex or out of wedlock would be highly frowned upon in the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, and as well as in, for some reason, many other religions too. The divorce in general too, was and still is heavily frowned um, upon the among the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, as as it is also in many other religions. And the alcoholism Pia's mother suffered from would have also been frowned upon, which we'll touch on with Lloyd, my interviewee. There are, of course, cases where it's ignored, as we'll also touch in the interview. The religion had an effect on every aspect of their lives, and even though Pia was not a baptized member of the church, she was an unbaptized Jehovah's Witness, and what little friends she would have had consisted mainly of other Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, let's watch the interview with Lloyd Evans, host and producer of an XJW podcast. Okay, just for starters, for my viewers, could you just tell them who you are? I know who you are, but most of my viewers do not.
Hello, I'm Lloyd Evans. I am host and producer of the Lloyd Evans channel on YouTube. I'm author of 2 books on Jehovah's Witnesses, The Reluctant Apostate and How to Escape Jehovah's Witnesses.
And wonderful. So the reason I asked you here is because this particular case involves a Jehovah's Witness girl. So Pia was 15 at the time, about to turn 16 within the following 2 months, I think. And she had 2 brothers. The circumstances of her disappearance are that on a Friday evening, her dad thought that she had cancelled her plans with a friend. What he thought that she cancelled. Um, but then when she had stormed out into the night, the October night can be cold, is cold here in Finland. And then eventually he figured, okay, maybe she didn't cancel. Uh, but then when she left, she closed the door behind her. No one saw her again.
Mm.
Now, what I would like to discuss with you is the JW aspects of this case.
Hmm.
It recently surfaced that our equivalent of the FBI obtained and executed a search warrant to the Watchtower Finnish branch office archives and the Kingdom Hall, which is the JW Church, what they call it. For both of them, they executed a search warrant.
Mm.
How unusual would this be that an FBI equivalent would actually obtain and execute a search warrant
I mean,
for
yeah.
premises like these?
Obviously, it's unusual in that it doesn't happen every day. It's not every day that government authorities obtain search warrants and intrude on the premises of Jehovah's Witnesses, branch offices, kingdom halls, etc. I would like it to happen more often, to be completely honest with you. But it's not completely unprecedented. We had, I think it was around 2019 or 2018 or 2019, the Dutch branch in Zwolle, Netherlands, was raided by police over records pertaining to child sexual abuse, not just the branch office at Zwolle, but a number of kingdom halls
Mm,
as well. So it seems becoming more of a thing. This is inevitable when you have a secretive group that kind of considers itself its own kind of justice system or has its own sort of Sharia
mm,
style court where it can decide whether crimes have been committed or whether things have been done that are harmful or abusive to people. So you would hope that more governments would be taking action like this, but
mm.
I would say that if we're being objective, it's not a usual thing for a government to do this.
Right. Um, it wasn't exactly the Finnish government
Mm,
that um, wanted to do the search. In the case of the Dutch search warrants, that was the case there. But
yeah.
these search warrants were based on the investigation of this
Mm,
Pia's case,
yeah.
because there was a man who was accused of sexually harassing a teen girl, and this guy was an adult at the time, um, and this was brought forward to the reporter of, well, the Finnish equivalent of a BBC or
Mm,
CNN,
mm,
um, that there were had been more cases, and this man was a person of interest, and because the cops found out that she had been called in as a witness. I'm not sure if these two cases were related in any way. This case I mentioned, this man case I just mentioned, if they were connected to this, but Pia had been called in as a witness to a judicial committee. Would you care to open the term judicial committee?
sure. So, just out of interest, was she called in as a witness to the Judicial Committee after her disappearance?
Before
Before her
she,
disappearance?
yeah, she
Yeah,
was
yeah,
called in as a witness
yeah.
shortly before she went
Mm.
missing.
Yeah, it's that again it is not unheard of. I mean, it's very difficult to um, to kind of glean any kind of statistics on, when it comes to the way committees of elders, as they're now called,
Mm.
operate, because again, everything is shrouded in so much
Mm.
secrecy. But there is provision made in the manuals that go out to elders, now called the Shepherd the Flock of God book, for witnesses to give testimony at these committees. I will say that it tends to um, take less seriously the testimony given by minors for some reason.
Mm.
But they do give provision for outsiders,
Mhm.
including minors, to testify at these committees.
Right. By the way, at this point, I need to. Uh, okay. I'll just check the audio settings again. But
Sure.
anyway, so what are these elders committees or judicial committees? Just for my viewers who have no idea what we're talking about here.
Sure. So the rules have changed fairly recently. So they're no longer called judicial committees, they're called committees of elders. But let's just call them judicial committees for the sake of argument, because that's what they are. A judicial committee is formed when there is an accusation that someone in the congregation has committed wrongdoing, and the elders are convinced that this wrongdoing has occurred. They will form a committee of 3 elders to meet with the accused. And the purpose of the committee meeting is ostensibly to establish the repentance of the wrongdoer. Now, in the past, it could be that someone could very strongly profess their repentance and their wish to be forgiven for what they've done. But very recently, they've relaxed the rules so that it seems almost anyone who just says, "Look, I'm sorry, it won't happen again," is more than likely going to get let off the hook. But a judicial committee is formed if any number of a myriad of rules is said to have been broken by someone who is a baptized member of a Jehovah's Witness congregation.
And these allegations could vary from anywhere from uh, smoking, masturbation, to taking blood
Yeah,
transfusion, etc.
I doubt masturbation would count. Definitely smoking. Things as silly as being a professional boxer, that can get you
Yeah.
a disfellowshipping or a removal from the congregation,
Mm.
I should say. But you're quite right. It varies from things that are we would consider to be inconsequential, such as a sexual relationship between 2 consenting adults,
Mm.
right through to criminal, basically crimes such
Mm.
as the abuse of children or even murder. And the guidelines to elders are very disturbing when it comes to the advice given for dealing with crimes
Mhm.
like child abuse and murder. For
Mm.
example, for murder, it says that just because the authorities or the police have come to a determination about the guilt of
Mhm.
someone accused of murder doesn't mean that that's the same determination should be made by elders.
Mhm.
So you could you could have someone who is sort of being defended and in a way protected by the congregation and still considered a witness, even though he's a convicted murderer.
Okay. And if a person is called as witness to a judicial committee, would it make any difference whether or not um, this Jehovah's Witness is baptized or unbaptized member of the congregation? Because in this case, Pia was not baptized yet.
Yeah, I think it would depend on how convincing the testimony is,
Hmm.
how well linked the testimony is to the event, whether it's sort of just hearsay or whether it's someone who is a direct eyewitness to what happened, and whether their testimony is compelling. I don't think necessarily they would be marked down in terms of relevance if they were an unbaptized publisher, if their testimony was compelling enough. But again, it's difficult to say because different elders deal with things in different ways. Just
Right.
because one body of elders will deal with a case in a certain way doesn't mean another one will do things the same. Yeah.
Right. So the use of alcohol of any sort in any quantity is heavily frowned upon. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that those who abuse alcohol should be removed from the congregation. But it's I don't want to kind of bore your viewers too much, but Jehovah's Witnesses have a bit of history here because second president of the Watchtower, or I should say third president, Joseph Rutherford, um, if you do much digging into his background, he was a very heavy drinker of alcohol. Even wrote books arguing against the prohibition of alcohol.
And we have the case of Tony Morris.
And more recently, we have the case of Tony Morris. And what I was going to say was that it was under Joseph Rutherford that there started to be like almost a culture of overindulging in alcohol at Bethel, at the headquarters. Now, after Rutherford had died, it seems that the organization clamped down a bit more on alcohol. But the thing with alcohol is, if you're going to make a rule where you can be disfellowshipped for becoming for using alcohol too much, it all becomes quite subjective, doesn't it, as to how much is too much.
Yeah.
And especially if someone's drinking behind closed doors, and they're perhaps concealing their alcoholism, that's when it gets a little bit more confusing. And I think that's why Anthony Morris, who was recently removed from the governing body, I think that's how he was able to kind of get away with his very blatant alcoholism for quite so long. But the Bethelites will have known, especially the ones who had to clean away his glass bottles. they will have known exactly how much he was drinking. Yeah.
So I brought this up because Pia's mom was an alcoholic.
Mm.
To my understanding, it was like really bad.
Mm.
And even when she was sober, she had withdrawals and hangover, and she she then used corporal punishment on the children, um, for a myriad of reasons, I guess. Is it common, or was it common maybe in the 80s and 90s? And at that time, how accepted was corporal punishments in JW community?
I wouldn't say it was just accepted. I would say it was required. So, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was made very clear to me that I needed to be beaten, or given some kind of physical punishment if my father or mother deemed it necessary. It was actually my father who would typically bend me over his knee and go at me with a belt. And he always used to say, "Oh, this is hurting me more than it hurts you." And I was thinking, no, I'm not so sure that's true. But he used to say that he had to do it, and he used to cite verses in the Bible that say things like "Spare the rod, spoil the child." They have slowly or subtly distanced themselves from that. Jeffrey Jackson famously denied that there was corporal punishment in his testimony before the Australian Royal Commission. And it's true that you can find more recent quotes in Watchtower literature that suggest that it's, that it's a kind of a last resort, if at all, something that should be even considered by parents. But, I would argue that if something has become so heavily embedded in witness culture, it's not enough to just give articles that sort of vaguely steer parents away from corporal punishment. It needs to
Oh.
be outright condemned, and that's not something that's, I think, ever appeared in
Mm.
Watchtower literature. Yeah.
All right. Um, so, as I understand it, divorce is also a bad thing in JW community. Is that correct?
Well, yes, they Jehovah's Witnesses believe very much in the sanctity of marriage, and that marriage should be forever, and the only grounds for a divorce is
Mm-hmm.
adultery, even if there is an abusive spouse, someone, a man, let's say a husband abusing his wife.
Mm-hmm.
The wife can't divorce the husband unless there is some kind of grounds for adultery. Yeah.
So, Pia's mom was an alcoholic, and well, there were three children in the family. Pia was the eldest, and then she had two younger brothers, one of whom was a year and a half younger, and then the youngest one was three years old at the time, in '88. So there were two big no nos, divorce and alcohol abuse, um, and they were quite poor. So
Mm.
they many witnesses say that they were sort of third class people in the congregation. What would that tell you if someone says that they were third class people in the congregation
Yeah, I doubt
as a
I doubt
result?
that they were referring to the financial
Probably
state
not.
of the
No,
company. I
no.
think that of the family. I think they were referring to the maybe the spiritual standing in the congregation. Um, what you have in every congregation is almost like a hierarchy, whereby you have the elders sitting at the top. Elders' wives carry an awful lot of not authority, but kind of respect in the congregation. And, the elders will typically hang out with the families that they consider to be spiritually strong. And if you're a family in a congregation and no one's really hanging out with you, or you're not being invited round to
Mm,
spend time with elders and their families, it probably means that you're looked down upon, not necessarily due to your financial situation, but probably because you're not attending meetings quite so much. Maybe someone in your family has a reputation for indulging in entertainment that's frowned upon, or as in this case, alcoholism. So Jehovah's Witnesses have this thing called bad association,
mhm.
where they will sort of informally designate someone as not to be socialized with, because their bad influence could rub off on others. So I
Uh-huh.
think, I mean, it could be just a language thing, but I think when they talk about third class, I think that's probably what they were referring to.
Uh-huh. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
The On the night Pia went missing, the dad, sauna is a big thing, and most Finnish houses have one. Um, so the dad has always referred to um, the Pia's maternal grandpa, even after divorce, as his father-in-law. So would this this would probably have something to do with the marriage being sacred and eternal.
Mm,
So
possibly.
yeah, possibly, yeah. So when Pia had an argument over the TV remote control with her elder brother, and then she stormed out with just jeans, a jean jacket, and a small purse into an October night, which can be rainy and really chilly here in Finland on the south coast. Um, the dad didn't miss his daughter, even though, even with these circumstances, that she was upset and stormed out
Mm,
with very little to no things on her and no
mm,
money. She
mm,
had 20, it I think he said that she had 20 Finnish marks, which would be something like equivalent to maybe 4 or 5 euros
mm,
nowadays, given inflation, etc. So 3, 4, 5 euros at the time, and he wasn't he didn't miss his daughter until Sunday when she didn't show up at the Kingdom Hall. Would this how I mean, even for a even if they were worldly people, it sounds ridiculous. How ridiculous would this be for a JW dad not to miss his teen daughter who stormed out with very little clothes, very little stuff, very little money into an October night?
I mean, I would hope that even believing Jehovah's Witness parents would condemn that kind of flagrant disregard and disinterest in the whereabouts of a child or of a minor, to just not be aware or bothered about where your child is, given the fact that there has been some kind of altercation, given the fact that your daughter is ill-equipped for outside conditions, and all of the circumstances surrounding Pia's disappearance
Mm,
would be, I think, red flags to any parent with common sense and
mm,
quite frankly just some basic paternal affection for their child.
mm,
So yeah, I think even many Jehovah's Witnesses would condemn that
mm,
kind of disregard for the welfare of a
mm.
child. Yeah.
And the reasoning he gave for this blatant disregard for his 15-year-old child is that he he was a bricklayer. He's 85 or something. Now he's still alive. He got a job for this happened on a Friday, and he got a job for the Saturday, and Pia had made plans to have a sleepover at a friend's place in the next
Mm,
town over. Uh, the dad gave this as a reason why he didn't bother checking up on his girl, even though he even though Pia had just a small purse and very little clothing. It's really really strange.
I
It,
mean, they still had telephones in 1988,
yes,
so
yes,
um, what's stopping him from just picking up the phone to the family where he thinks his daughter is going to and just making sure that she got there safely?
mm,
I don't think that any excuses that he's making about, oh well, there were prior arrangements, even if there were prior arrangements made, the fact that there was a last minute change for him taking his son to work because the whole point was that
mm,
Pia needed to babysit. The very fact that there'd been an altercation or an argument, meaning that there was ill feeling, and when teenagers kind of storm out, they can possibly get into situations that they might regret. So
mm,
again, any responsible parent is going to be worried sick about where their daughter is, and it costs nothing, or it costs a minimal amount of money in 1988 to just pick up the phone and call the friend's
mm.
house and make sure she's there and she's okay. Yeah.
Because the dad knew exactly where she
Mm,
the dad knew where this the friend's name, where she
mm,
lived,
mm,
etc. So it's really really weird to me.
mm,
There are so many weird aspects to this case. I
mm,
mean, there are. because it seems as if there are no one, absolutely no one, saw her as after she closed the door behind her.
Can I ask why it's taken so long for this to kind of come to a head? Because we're talking what 36 years.
They've
Uh,
they've been investigating this
right,
on and off for
right,
these past 36 years.
yeah,
But it it's only now that the police were able to obtain the search warrants, because they
yeah,
got it wasn't long ago that they actually only received the information that she had been called as a witness to the
right,
judicial committee
right,
from a new witness, actually.
right.
New
And that
witness.
so that tipped the scales so that they could see that this could potentially mean
Yeah,
that there was some kind of motive for an individual
they
to do something
well
to Pia.
well
Yeah.
they it was known at least since the 90s that
Mm,
there had been, well, at least known to the police, not the public,
mm,
until now, that there had been this guy who was an adult at the time in 88, who had been approaching inappropriately or sexually harassing younger girls. And now that they gathered, they managed to obtain enough evidence only now, 36 years later, to
right,
obtain the search warrants.
right.
And as we discussed earlier, it's not easy to obtain and execute a search warrant to the
Mm,
premises of Jehovah's Witnesses.
yeah,
So it took them a lot of work. And the police have done some sloppy work. Um, there was a sex offender who died maybe 10, 15 years ago, who had just been released on parole. Um, a pedo who had just been released on parole shortly before this happens. And after that, he made horrible crimes and was put away for the rest of his life and died in a hospital ward in prison
mm,
after being locked up for 30 years.
yeah,
So there's a connection, and there's a connection because this man's ex-wife lived lived in that very same small town where Pia went missing.
right,
So but he's dead now, so they
yeah,
can't go asking questions anymore. But there have been suspicions on
mm,
that, but there's no concrete evidence. The only concrete evidence they have is a license plate for a car, which came in a letter in 2002. So, and it's really weird. That apparently that raises even more questions. Why hasn't there been uh, any eyewitnesses who have come forward saying, "Yes, I saw this girl after
mm,
that evening"?
yeah.
It's really
And
weird.
tragic as well,
Yeah,
because
it's really tragic.
almost certainly, Pia is dead now,
Yes, she's
and
presumed dead. Yes.
it's we know so little about how she met her fate, and when we don't know anything, we're not able to bring those responsible to
Mm-hmm.
justice and make the community safer. So
Mm.
multiple layers of tragedy here. Yeah.
Yes, and there have been um, some talk that because there was a disco for high school students, which were about her age and a few years younger, sorry, a few years older, and but they were from the next town over. For some
Mm,
reason, the high school students from the next town over rented a clubhouse um, from this small town, which had like 4,000, 5,000 people living in. at the moment, and there have been talks that someone or someone's saw her, but no one has come forward,
Mm.
because there were so many people. But
Yeah.
this is really, really, really weird, and the tragedy has struck her family more than more than once after this one. Her younger brother passed away. Her mom passed away. His older brother has been to jail, substance abuse. His dad is an inactive or faded member of the JW community, and he's doing his knockoff Bible studies, regarding the seven,
Sounds like he's an apostate and the elders haven't caught up to him yet, to be honest. Yeah.
and he's been doing Bible studies, where he's been talking about the seven-headed beast of, of the Bible, and the
Yeah.
seven-headed beast includes Nebuchadnezzar, Stalin, Hitler, etc.,
Mm.
and the
Okay.
Rothschild family. So,
Of course.
and he married another woman who died 5 weeks after the wedding. So it's really been a tragedy for the family.
Yeah. But hey, if he'd have been a bit more vigilant on the night, maybe Piia would still be around.
Who knows? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it we can't really know. But
Mm.
in this episode, I'll insert this interview somewhere in the
Mm.
um, episode, and I'll discuss some further details, some really weird details
Yeah.
that we there is no point going through this video
Okay.
this interview, because there are it's more of caveats
Yeah, I sure.
caveats
I
with
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
with a local fisherman and
Mm.
etc. So
Okay. I understand.
thanks for watching the interview. That was really, really enlightening. I think Lloyd is a really, really nice guy. I really like him. So Pia had been heavily bullied in elementary school, both physically and psychologically. And the bullying took many names. She was and many forms. She was called derogatory names, beaten, discriminated against, made an outcast, and so forth. Just because she was different, and kids can be brutal, absolutely horribly brutal. Once she left elementary school and started studying a profession, I think housekeeping, in a vocational school, because um, Jehovah's Witnesses discourage higher education, so no high school. The school was in a big city in Turku. It's some 25-ish, I think, kilometers from Piia, and there's a direct bus line, so easy enough to go to school without a car and so forth. Um, Her physically abusive, alcoholic mother was gone. New school, physically abusive mother was gone. Uh, she had recently started at a new school, new town, and she loved the school. And she had stated that she admired one of the female teachers and wanted to be like her when she grew up. So, on the surface, at least, she seemed to have been living a much better life in the months leading up to the events than the years prior. In the months leading to her disappearance, her diaries portray a happy young lady. In her earlier diary from the spring or early summer of that year of 1988, she mentions she met a guy on a school trip called Börje, when they went out for a school trip for a week or so, I think. As far as I can tell, it was around a week maybe in the Åland archipelago, the Åland Islands, which is an autonomous province of Finland. She wrote in her diary and in her letters to a friend that she even went to the forest with that guy, of her or a few years older, and that she had crushes on several boys. It's not specified what they did in the forest. Uh, I would venture to guess kissing at most. So normal teen girl stuff, I guess, but not very Jehovah's Witness. If someone in the congregation found out, she would have been in big trouble in the congregation and maybe in a judicial committee even. As we discussed in the interview, there was also a judicial committee, which is kind of a Jehovah's Witnesses internal court hearing system, or judicial system. Um, and Piia had been called into as a witness to a judicial committee for a case of sexual harassment case. Um, the Watchtower has a very warped sense of right and wrong. You know, if you look at it objectively, um, they have their own internal judicial system called judicial, judicial committees, and um, there's a new name for it now, but it's basically the same thing. But there is, and the Watchtower has a history of covering up sexual abuse and even keeping records of those cases, the assailants, even though they claim otherwise. They've been caught red-handed in for doing this. For example, in the Australian Royal Commission from a few years back. I suggest you check it if you're interested. Uh, but there is no evidence Pia had ever been abused by anyone. There's just no evidence anywhere, anywhere, any evidence whatsoever. So official sources, namely the police and her dad, have said that she was shy and picky about her friends. Also, no boyfriend per se is known to have been around at the time or in the past, uh, but especially at the time of disappearance or any previous ones. Even the birdie she went to the forest with, they were just crushes. Um, the truth here is that she was a Jehovah's Witness, and worldly people or non JW, non Jehovah's Witnesses would be considered bad association, as Lloyd said in the interview. Now, as I said in the beginning, Bia's dad didn't miss his daughter, until Sunday, who, mind you, stormed out into the cold, rainy October night in very little clothing, given the weather and time of year, and hardly any money. 20 Finnish marks. That's about seven euros now, 7.5 USD. She left um, all of her all of her personal belongings, like clothes, um, hairbrush, toothbrush, cosmetics, all of that was left behind, and none of that rang any bells uh, until Sunday. So she was gone for 48 hours um, before anyone got even the slightest bit worried. And that's really, really weird. I mean, super strange, which adds to the oddity of this case, or the absurdity rather. When Pia's dad, Heikki Ristikankare, went to the nearest police station the next Monday morning to report his daughter missing, they didn't take it very seriously, which is kind of weird. She was 15 years old and just ran off with little to no clothing, very little money, and considered the case as a teen girl um, having gone her own way after a heated argument with her brother, and that she would come home in a few days, which she didn't. And this is weird from the cops, uh, because given the lack of history of running away from home, or just taking a long weekend, uh, they still considered it as such, even though it wasn't her type of thing to do, and she had no history of doing so, which is kind of strange. But I've seen some really sloppy police work in other unsolved cases, like the case uh, Jennifer Fairgate that I made my first um, true crime video about. Um, it's as if they didn't even want to solve the case, and I'll link the video regarding the case of Jennifer Fairgate down in the description of this video. So about a week or week and a half later, the police started realizing that she is not coming back, and they should start looking for her more seriously than just putting out be on the lookout notices to police patrols. And the local police searched the family home, and the National Bureau of Investigations, or our equivalent of FBI, did some searches, and the local and the national police did ran canines in the house. So, and grounds, the yards, their property. Um, so there is no evidence of any foul play uh, in the family home or the family property. Her DNA has been collected from tooth and hair brushes that were taken from her home. Uh, Understandable. Yeah, that was, back in '88, it wasn't really a thing, but the dad kept her toothbrushes, or her toothbrush and hairbrush and makeup, didn't throw them away, and so they were able to get the DNA from those much, years later, when DNA became widely available in the '90s. Um, when the '90s came about, Pia's mother died of illnesses brought on by her long-term alcoholism. Um, and then at some point in the early '90s, or early to mid '90s, the investigation was, at least sometime in the '90s, it shifted from a disappeared person to a homicide, being basically, here in Finland, the first step from being investigated as a uh, missing persons case is when the person is presumed dead, missing but presumed dead. It's investigated as a manslaughter, but the statute of limitation for manslaughter is 20 years in Finland, but there is no statute of limitation for murder, uh, because well, she was presumed when the 90s came about. She was already presumed dead, unfortunately, and she was pronounced dead in absentia in 2011. So the National Bureau of Investigations, or our FBI, took over the case in 2003 when they received a letter, but and that she and then it was just a few years earlier. It had been, I think, in 2001 or 2002. It had been shifted. I'll come back to that. They received a tip letter, which turned the investigation from a search of a dead missing person to a murder investigation. And as I said, BO's declared dead in absentia on January 1st, 2011. During the investigation, the police have been managed to to track down most people mentioned in Pia's diaries, as far as I can tell. Even the guy Pia went to forest with on the school trip, and that guy in particular has passed away since. Some speculate, and he also had substance abuse problems, and some speculate that this guy started drinking and abusing other substances because, yeah, out of guilt. But there's absolutely no proof that he was in any way involved, and that there's no evidence that Pia had been in contact with this guy after the school trip. So there's been no evidence of no evidence or no official suspicion by the authorities of involvement by any of those who Pia wrote about in her diaries or letters. Uh, their parents, his the her Pia's father was a suspect, because they always investigate the family first, but there have been no evidence that Pia's dad, granddad, or brother had anything to do with her disappearance. There's been no proof. But there have been alleged sightings of Pia from the evening and the following days, from the evening she went missing. Early on in this video, I mentioned the disco that was held at the local youth house that evening. According to a source that the Finnish equivalent of a BBC, Yle, interviewed, said that that night a few people saw Pia walking past, and rumors have it that she even spoke to someone, but there is absolutely no evidence of any of this ever happening, and none of these people have ever come forward to the police. No one has ever talked to the police about this. And anyway, these are just rumors, some just rumors, allegations. This source also says that it would have been almost impossible that no one saw her, because so many people were there that night. But the other side of that is that the vast majority of the youth that were out that night were from the next town over, and therefore may not have recognized her because they hadn't gone to the same schools with her. So they might not have paid attention because they didn't recognize her and didn't care. Also, Pia's teacher. Uh, I'm not sure if this is a former or present teacher. Uh, Claimed to have seen her on a bus a week after she went missing, but this girl has proven not to have been Pia. This girl just happened to look like her, but it wasn't her. It's been proven that it wasn't her. Uh, and A schoolmate also claimed to have seen Pia in Turku some days later, the following week, near their school in Turku, but wasn't sure because this girl was dressed in light colored clothes and Pia was usually dressed in black. Uh, but this but this schoolmate wasn't sure, and the police actually managed to track down this girl and identified this girl that was seen, and were proven that it wasn't Bia. So the sighting was proven false. All the sightings have been proven false or vague rumors at best. The investigation shifted gears to a murder investigation in April of 2002. So the investigation shifted gears from a missing persons and homicide case, kind of a manslaughter case, to a murder investigation in April of 2002, when the local police got hold of a letter which had been indicated as having arrived from Sweden, but the letter was written in um, what was attempted to mask as poor Finnish, and dated on November 20th, 2001 in Borås, Sweden, and stamped as having been sent from Turku, Finland, where Pia went to school, and Pia's hometown Piikkiö is very near. The letter took about 6 months to arrive to the police because it was first addressed to the police TV or the police TV show uh, that was broadcast by Yleisradio, which is the Finnish equivalent to like the BBC or CNN, and and then they relayed it to the police. Now, the writer claimed to have arrived to Turku from Sweden. There's a good ferry traffic between Turku and Stockholm, Sweden, and then the driver claims to have started driving east towards East Finland around midnight after having sobered up, and then the anonymous writer, uh, also claims to have seen an unconscious looking girl being lifted to a car, and mentioned the car being a white Volvo, and a license plate was also mentioned, but the license plate has been retracted uh, from the from the letter of the version of the letters that or of the picture of of the picture of the letter that has been distributed publicly by the police, because privacy reasons, I guess, because the car itself is still around with the same license plate, but the car is owned by a different person now, so they don't want to implicate someone who has absolutely zero connection to the car, or who hasn't owned the car back in '88. So, but the car has been searched many times. They even took it apart. It's been taken apart by the police, and nothing was found. But who knows? I'll come back to the issue of the car a bit later on. The letter, um, or the writer of the letter has written the letter in Finnish and in a way that would imply that the person speaks better Swedish than Finnish. It's written in Finnish, but this writer has apparently, according to linguists, implanted certain aspects, certain linguistic aspects of the letter that would make it appear to be to have been written by someone who speaks better Swedish than Finnish. And the previous chief investigator suspected that the author actually lives in Finland, sorry, in Sweden, um, and linguistic analysis of the letter has, however, shown that the writer knows Finnish very well, and no indications of Swedish can be picked up. So it has been just made up to look like the writer's first language is Finnish and sorry, Swedish, and then made it look like they speak poor Finnish. But that is with two exceptions of two words that seemed to have been planted in to throw off into the wrong direction. I've seen the copy of the letter, and as a native Finnish speaker, I can tell that without a degree in linguistics, that the text is very good. Is good Finnish from someone who ha- who has at least moderate literary abilities. It's good Finnish in the sense that it's clearly been written by someone who knows the language and has used abbreviation an abbreviation that would be hard for a non-Finnish speaker to use um, in a letter or in a written text. As mentioned, the white Volvo mentioned in the letter was struck down. The current owner is not the same as back in 1988, but has let the police search the car a number of times with, for example, dogs and with crime scene techs, and they've probably even taken the car apart. They even took 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 the car from the current owner for a week for investigations. In 2013, Pia's relative, not it hasn't been defined as how distant or how close relative, but this relative received a tip phone call pointing to the same direction as the writer of this letter. In the spring and summer of 2018, that would be in 15 years, 15 over 15 years since the letter was received. The police published the letter, and I have no idea why it took so long. Uh, Several women have come forward with reporting incidents from the 1970s and 1980s where a man with a car, not specified probably as far as I can tell what kind of car, but a white car probably as far as I can tell, but this is not 100% sure, certain, of a man with a car, possibly white car, neck who stopped next to them when they were walking outside, stopped next to them and tried to drag them forcefully into the car. But nothing further happened. But nothing worse happened as far as I can tell from the sources. Um, the police have connected the car, the white Volvo, to a person who lives in the area, in the Piia area, or more, or as the police said, in the Turku area, the greater Turku area, but they have implied that more specifically the Piikio area, and has convictions of fraud, driving under influence, assaulting women, illegal threat, and rape. He is now in his 60s, so he would have probably been in his late 20s or early 30s in 1988. Uh, and it was indicated that the man had this car in his use or available to him, and it has not been made explicitly clear uh, whether or not he owned the car himself, but witnesses have come forward saying that it was possibly the person's dad's car, uh, but it's not explicitly clear whether or not it was his car or whether he owned it himself or whether it was owned by someone else, but it was available, but what he was mostly using the car. But it's the owner relations are a bit unclear. A much more recent investigation uh, or development in the investigation of Pia's case is something that was covered in the interview with Lloyd Evans. The Jehovah's Witnesses Kingdom Hall, which is something akin to a church, where the Kingdom Hall that Piia and her family went to, was searched by the National Bureau of Investigations. It was not. They searched the entire building, and then they searched the archives of the Finnish branch office of the Jehovah's Witnesses for documents with Pia's name or and the names of any of the family members that Pia's family members, whether it be her dad, brothers, mother, and so forth. It looks like the police have something new on their hands because they wouldn't, if they didn't, would not have um, they wouldn't have obtained and been able to um, obtain and execute a search warrant in a church and in the offices of a religious organization. The National Bureau of Investigations or the NBI, is still very silent about these searches, but I understand completely. They don't want to compromise an ongoing investigation the ongoing investigation to this particular issue, or into new evidence, because they probably want to, um, peace, they want the little peace and quiet to go through the evidence. But if they didn't have anything new, they wouldn't have been able to search the premises. So this was late last year, early this year, when they searched the Kingdom Hall and the branch office archives. Um, there is also the picture of Piia. You can see on the side, next to me. The bottom one is something that has, at least in recent years, been distributed by the police. Is a recent picture of Piia and her father, uh, a very religious man, now 85 or 86 years old. Poor man, hasn't been able to admit that the bottom picture is of his daughter, because in that picture, she's already grown up. She was called Punk Bia because she was dressed up a bit punkish, listened to worldly rock music and so forth. And then the dad has been circulating the top picture, which is obviously very much younger Bia. He just probably cannot, and the dad, because dad hasn't been able to admit to himself that this picture, the lower one, is of his daughter. But it has been, the police is baffled as to why, but because the police have confirmed with 100% certainty that this bottom picture is of Pia, and it's been confirmed 100%. And this is more recent, and this is an older one, a school picture from probably elementary school, from maybe sixth or seventh grade, maybe, I don't know. So he, Pia's dad probably wants to see his little daughter as a little little innocent blonde girl. Pia's case is one of the most famous cases of unsolved disappearances in Finland. There are a few unsolved disappearances, but not as many as, per capita. Not as many per capita as far as I can tell, compared to many other countries. But her case has had new developments in the past year, and over the years, every now and then there had been something new. There have been new developments even now, after 35 years, almost 36 years after her disappearance in 1988. And I am hopeful, very hopeful, that this case will be solved in the next few years, just for the sake of the family. Uh, Bia's family has gone through so much pain and death over the years. Her mother's substance abuse problems, the family kids being bullied at school because of their religion and their mother, and the her brothers had to suffer at school and in social life, after their sister went missing, and because of it. And Bia goes missing a few years later. After that, their mother of the children dies. Early 2000s, Pia's younger brother, Galle, who was 3 years old at the time of Pia's disappearance, um, dies after battling with substance abuse and other issues. I think it was in 2005 or something like that. Somewhere around there, 2005 to 2008. Her dad's second wife has also passed away. That was 5 weeks after the wedding. Pia's father is now in his mid 80s, 85, 86 years old. I think 86 now. I hope he and Pia's brother Deo, who has had, as far as I can tell, some issues with alcohol. Also, I would like for their sake to have the case solved after so many years. And I think all the evidence that the police have gathered in 36 years, and some witnesses who have not come forward as of yet, will hold the key to solving this case at some point. And I hope, for the Pia's dad's sake, that this case would be solved before he passes away. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave me a like. Thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down. If you want to get notifications for and subscribe for more further content, please subscribe and turn on the notifications, and check the links in the description. There will be the link to my first true crime video about the case of Jennifer Fairgate. There will be playlist links, Discord links, and of course links to my Patreon and PayPal. If you want to make a one-time donation, click the link to PayPal. And if you want to make a monthly pledge to my channel, please click the link to Patreon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.